The Indianapolis Colts have a major need at outside corner this offseason. Will they open up the checkbooks to address it? Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Hicks, your resident film nerd at horseshoehuddle.com. My partner, Jake Arthur, is our credentialed Crocs on the ground for the site. Today, we are talking all about outside cornerback, the need the Colts have, and we're particularly going to be looking at free agency today when it comes to outside corner. The Colts have used a lot of draft picks at outside corner the last couple of years. Some have hit, some have missed. So maybe it's time to finally go outside of the draft, bring in some outside free agents. So today we're going to talk about buy low / cheap options that could make sense for the Colts. We're going to talk about some big game hunting if the Colts actually want to open up that checkbook and go for the big fish in free agency. But also, Jake, we're going to talk about why there is a need for outside corner this offseason, because I think on paper, when we talk about the biggest needs for the Colts this offseason, I don't think many people would say outside corner just in terms of like statistical output last year, because the guys that they rolled out there were kind of fine on paper last year, but with this new scheme coming in, with more press man coverage, with more leaving these corners on an island, we are kind of all of the opinion that, you know, look, Sam Womack and Jalen Jones played well last year, but they probably need either an upgrade or at least some competition in camp for those guys.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, there's not really any depth. You know, Chris Lamons was one of your main depth pieces last year, and he's gone. And he was someone who wasn't even, you know, a highly rated player. So you're looking at the difference in last year to this year primarily. And again, like you said, there's just going to be more responsibility on the cornerbacks, and they're just going to have to play better. And you would hope that the pass rush is going to be better, but that's no guarantee. I mean, you got to try and maximize both areas. If we're trying to just generalize how guys did last year, I'm looking at their PFF grades, and it's broken down into like good, above average, average, and below average. Their best players were Samuel Womack and Kenny Moore were rated as above average. Jalen Jones and Dallas Flowers, who obviously isn't even there anymore, were average. And then below average were Lamons, David Long, and Juju Brents, who is another guy who only kind of factors in, kind of reaching the Jelani Woods level, unfortunately, where discussions have to, you know, he's kind of at the end of the whole discussion just because he was a second round pick, but through 2 years, he hasn't been 100% at any point. So you've gotten by with just good enough so far, and your injury's not totally ruining the group. But when you look at the fact that they're going to have more responsibilities, and Jones is, but like they're not necessarily the type that Lou Anarumo would typically use. There's going to be a big need. Plus, they're probably going to face a better group of quarterbacks this year as well. Last year, they skated by facing a lot of young quarterbacks and a lot of backups as well. So they got kind of lucky not going into the buzzsaw too many times. But they're kind of playing with fire if they stay status quo this year.
Yeah, I think there was a big concern going into last season when it came to the outside corner play because, I mean, look, on paper, it was kind of a scary group. Jalen Jones was a 7th round pick coming off his rookie season. We didn't really know what year 2 was going to look like for him. They claimed Samuel Womack prior to the season off of waivers, got really lucky with that claim. And I think both of those players did overperform expectations, especially when Juju Brents went down with an injury. The Colts were really forced into starting, again, a former 7th round pick and a guy that they claimed off waivers. And for the most part, it was fine last year. But if you really want to take that next step as a defense, you need better than fine. And I fully believe that Jalen Jones is a starting caliber corner in the NFL. I think he had a really good season last year. Still only I think he's only 22, 23 years old. So still a really young player as well. I'm perfectly fine with Jalen Jones having the inside track to earn a starting job next year in this defense. For Womack, I think it's a little bit more up in the air. We saw some really good things from him early in the season, but as the season went on, we did see some cracks in his game. We saw some vertical passes being completed on him, and I still think it was a good year from him. Like, don't get me wrong, but I do think there is an opportunity to upgrade on him this offseason. So whether that's free agency, whether that's a draft, whether that's whatever, just getting in another corner that, like, again, Womack can be the starter next year, but make him earn it in camp. Don't make him have to go against Juju Brents, who has maybe like 2 games that he'll play next season, or anything like that. Like, make him go against a real guy who can actually play some games next year and then go from there. I think these guys have a chance to earn their spots, but the Colts certainly need to go out there and add, again, either a big name guy, a small name guy, a draft guy, like somebody in here to compete for a starting job, or maybe even upgrade over those guys, because, again, fine is fine. Fine is perfectly fine for this team, but you want more from your defense. You can't just get a C all the time in your class and hope that that's good enough. Like, let's aim for a little bit higher with this defense, and I think the Colts have the opportunity with the cap space they have.
Yeah, and this isn't even really reading between the lines. The Colts basically gave every indication that they were not satisfied with their cornerback group. 2 years ago, they missed on Darius Rush. They kind of tried to correct it a little bit last year. I think they relied a little bit too much on Juju Brents, but in the draft, they drafted Micah Abraham and Jalen Simpson. They missed on both of them as well. They felt the need to have to go get Samuel Womack, who, again, he performed very well for the Colts. He was their highest graded corner from PFF. I mean, the eye test, whatever. He still was a decent player.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there was a reason that San Francisco felt it was okay to not only not have him as like a full-time starter, but to let him go and put him out on waivers. So it worked out for the Colts, but if they want to take that next step, that can't be necessarily the kind of guy that's like a pillar of the defense. So I would also say the Colts are more likely to go the free agent route with corner this year, just because they have swung and missed on corner so much. Plus, they felt like they could pass up Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean last year in the draft, 2 guys who would have been great options for them, either at 15 or trading back a little bit. They whiffed on both of them. So by going with an actual free agent, someone who has tape in the NFL and they kind of know who that player is a little bit more, I think it's a layup that they're absolutely going to do at least a move or two on that position in free agency.
Yeah, and we know Chris Ballard does not spend in free agency, even though he's put his own back against the wall in his postseason press conference saying that he will look into spending more this offseason. We have to kind of see it to believe it. But the 2 positions that he has historically spent on has been defensive end and cornerback. He has spent at those positions, whether it's, at corner, like big name guys like Stephon Gilmore gave out, $12 million a year, I think, or $10 million a year for him. I think the second contract to Xavier Rhodes, I mean, they bought low on him the first time, but the second one was a pretty decent deal. And he's even shown the ability to spend, for low rotational buy low guys in free agency as well at corner, in TJ Carey, in Brandon Faison. I think Pierre Desir, I think, was a free agent they brought in as well. Like, waiver guy. So he has shown the ability, though, to add to the cornerback room in free agency with vets. So, look, again, I'm not fully believing that Chris Ballard is going to be this spend-happy GM this offseason, but if there is a position group that he does like to spend on, corner is one of them. So I could see, again, we're going to go through some high-price free agents here in a second, but I could see at least some cheaper, like buy low, 1-year deal option guys, because, again, he has shown the ability to spend at corner in the past.
Yeah, there's a couple things here. Number one, you have a new defensive coordinator with Lou Anarumo. You've got to give him something. So Anarumo certainly is going to have a type that he wants to bring in. And then we know Ballard will, on occasion, usually I'll say, go with his guys. We like our guys. So let's say they roll the dice with Jalen Jones, Samuel Womack, and Juju Brents, with Kenny Moore as the nickel. I think he knows they at least have to have that TJ Carey, that, that 4th, 5th corner that has some experience. I think he knows that they have to have that player. We'll see. That would probably be the buy low option, but At this point, I don't think there's any reason not to swing high for the fences on this.
Yeah, they need to do something at corner. Again, we're going to go through some upgrades in big game hunting here in a second, but they do need to do something at corner. They can't just sit on their hands like they have in the past, because even if you are very high on Womack and Jones, you can't be high on Juju Brents right now. You can't have any positive opinion on Juju Brents right now. You can't have any opinion in general. So you can't even operate like he is a player that you have next season. So you at least need to have bodies in the room. So we're going to talk about big game hunting here in a second, but I mean, look, the Colts just need to add somebody this offseason.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. Plus, if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I personally love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. If it's getting boring, there's not much scoring going on, find something to bet on. The Super Bowl was another good example of that as well. Whether I'm backing the teams I cover for a late game rally or just picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I miss my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you place your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Zach, let's say Chris Ballard turns over a new leaf. He is feeling giddy. He will not be outbid, and he is going to make it rain on, let's say, one outside, big priced outside corner this year. Give us a list of names of guys who make the most sense.
Yeah, so when I did my article for this on horseshoehuddle.com, I think last week is when I posted my article, the two guys I put as the big fish for Chris Ballard to chase are very opposite ends of the spectrum. On one end, you have the former All-Pro Charvarius Ward with the San Francisco 49ers. Look, we know he likes to take corners from the 49ers. It just worked with Samuel Womack. They tried to take Ambry Thomas off waivers late in the season, but they failed. I think he failed a physical coming in. Yeah, so he has an affection for those San Francisco 49ers corners. And Ward, I know he's not coming off the greatest season this past year. He had a lot of injury issues, plus had a very sad personal personal thing that happened this year. So it wasn't the all-pro caliber season this past year, but look back in 2023, he was an all-pro corner, one of the best corners in football. He's from that winning culture, very good player. And I think that's the type of player that Chris Ballard, if he's going to open up the checkbooks, would go after in free agency. The other one is more so for me. This is not really a guy I don't know if Chris Ballard will go after, but I think Paulson Adebo from the Saints would be a fantastic grab. Adebo broke his I think his fibula or femur this past season.
Femur,
yeah. Broke his femur this past season, so just a horrific injury. Luckily, it's a break. It's not a tear of like an Achilles or something, so odds are he's going to be able to bounce back from that. But Adebo was a guy who slipped a little bit in the draft, a big-time playmaker in college, comes to the NFL, huge-time playmaker in the NFL as well. The Saints really had a gem on their hands. He was in the midst of arguably his best career season heading into free agency before that unfortunate injury. And that might help a team like the Colts if they were to pursue him in free agency, because if he finishes the whole year the way that he was going, he might have been a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro even, and we'd be talking about his price tag being, in the Charvarius Ward type of range. Now it might be like more of like a prove it like 1 or 2 year deal. So Adebo might fit more so of like the Colts money that they go after in free agency. But Ward is certainly like the archetype that Ballard likes. So really pick your poison there. I think Ward will get a pretty hefty sum in free agency, maybe upwards of like $15-16 million per year. Adebo, it's kind of hard to project because he's been a very productive corner, but he's coming off that big injury, and you just don't know where teams are going to value that. So I could see Adebo being anywhere from like $6 million a year, anywhere upwards of like 10, 11, 12, because the play has been really great. It's just that injury is a little bit scary. So those are the two guys I really like, though. Adebo, I think, is still only like 25 years old. I think Ward is like 31 or 30 at this
Mhm.
point. So that's more of your like win now type option, where Debo is just betting on a young player that's been pretty good.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I had a Debo on my Colts free agency big board as well, and everything I found, there's no reason to think he's not gonna be able to play on time and like be doing all the offseason work because it happened early enough in the season. So
Yeah.
a Debo, as long as like the Colts were to pass him medically, it should be fine. But yeah, I had Ward and a Debo as well. A few other guys that are probably going to command a decent price tag that I think would be worth looking into. DJ Reed from the Jets. He seems like he's ready to go out the door, as is Ward. I think both those guys are ready to bounce from where they're at. Russell Douglas, he was a draft favorite back in the day for kind of all of us on Twitter. He's with the Bills now, kind of resurrected his career a bit. Carlton Davis from the Lions. What you kind of lack in the athleticism there, you have size, physicality, and kind of a winning pedigree as well. And then, of course, Adebo. Adebo is really the only one that doesn't have the long stretch of winning, or the winning culture throughout his career. Like Ward has won a Super Bowl with the Chiefs, been to Super Bowl with the 49ers. He's been an All-Pro. Reed, I forget where he was before the Jets, but I mean, he's a proven Seattle. He's a proven really good player and has been in the playoffs. Douglas again with the Bills. Obviously, the Bills are the Bills. Davis has won a Super Bowl with the Bucks. Was in the playoffs with the Lions. So most of these guys are the type of guys I think they're going to be looking for. Because not only are they going to try and be more serious in free agency, I think, but they want guys who they're not going to have their hands held. They're not going to worry about what they're doing away from the facility. Are they studying, things like that? A lot of these guys know what it takes to win and have been part of not only winning teams, but ones that have gotten to the biggest stage. So I think these guys all fit really well. And plus, if you're just talking about on-field product, with the exception of DJ Reed, all these guys kind of fit the size and physicality check marks you're going to be looking for with the man coverage. And while Reed isn't the biggest guy, he's a proven NFL commodity. Like he's put good tape out there throughout his career. I think when I looked at him, like pretty much every year of his career has been in the good category according to the PFF grades, like well above average throughout his career. So these guys make a ton of sense, and sure, they're going to command, I'm sure, north of $10 million or so in today's NFL. But I mean, if you want to be serious about winning, you got to pay for it.
Yeah, and I don't think like guys like a guy like Carlton Davis, I don't think is immediately going to make you like a contender or anything, but he's just a guy who knows what he's doing, can get in there and be a steady force that the Colts just haven't had at corner. And look, if he loses out to a guy like Womack in camp, then cool, Womack won the job. Go take over the job. But I think even with these big name guys, like it's the competition, it's bringing in a player who knows what they're doing and who's been around the league for a little bit. And then going off of what you said, Jake, in terms of like what fits the Lou Anarumo system, again, the Colts are going to play a little bit more man coverage. They're going to want bigger, more athletic type corners. So maybe like a DJ Reed doesn't fit with the size, but he certainly fits with the athleticism. Maybe a Carlton Davis or Rasul Douglas aren't as athletic, but they fit with the size and experience. And then like an Adebo and Ward, they kind of check every box, I think, in terms of what Anarumo wants and also what the Colts are looking for. So if the Colts are going to pay big at corner in free agency, my money would be on one of these guys here. I really do think Ward would be the type that Ballard would go after. I just, again, the money's going to be pretty expensive for him. Was Ward in Kansas City with Ballard? I
don't know if he was there that
far.
I don't know if he was there that early, but he's been in Kansas City like during the Mahomes era when they started winning.
Yeah, we know that Ballard loves to go after Kansas City guys, and he likes 49ers corners. So to me, it just fits like aesthetically in my head going after Charvarius Ward. But I do expect a pretty big market, like a team like Washington, who is like one corner away from being like a Super Bowl contender, has like $200 million to spend this offseason. So it'll be competitive, but we've seen Ballard in the past go after these big name free agents, but come up short because he doesn't want to spend that extra buck. Look, if he wants to get one of these guys, you have to go a little above and beyond. for a guy like Ward or for even a guy like a Debo or Reed. So we'll see if the Colts do any big game hunting this offseason at corner. But let's say they go more on the lower end. They go to bring in competition or just bring in some experience. Who are some guys that fit? We're going to talk about that here in just a second.
Football season may be over. It feels weird to say that, but basketball is in full swing, and there's no better way to stay in the game than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks is quick and easy. You can set up your lineup in less than 60 seconds, and their fast and secure withdrawals mean that you get your winnings in as little as 15 minutes. Plus, I love their weekly promos like Taco Tuesday, where you get your discounted player projections for an even better value. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, Zach, we're rummaging through the $5 DVD bin at Walmart. We're going bargain bin shopping. We know this is what's close to Chris Ballard's heart. So even if he doesn't get the high price guys and he wants the TJ Carries and the Brandon Faisons of the world, we do have several options here that we think are pretty good, whether it's athleticism, size, physicality, whatever. This is a pretty good group of players, and if they miss out on those top guys, I think they'll be fine if they grab 1 or even 2 of these. So I know a couple of these guys that I've got listed here made your top cornerback free agent fits list. So why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Yeah, so just for some background, when I was doing my list, especially when it came to like the buy lows or just the good veteran options, I was looking for corners above like that 6-foot threshold who have some good size to them as well, but also that tested really well or have been known for their athleticism in the NFL. So obviously some of these guys are a little bit older, so they're not going to be as athletic as they were as draft prospects, but they are still pretty good athletes at that corner position. So the ones that I narrowed it down to were Christian Fulton from the Chargers, Brandon Stevens from the Ravens, Shaq Griffin from the Vikings, and then a super buy low option, Eric Stokes from the Packers. So just to quickly run through these guys, Christian Fulton, maybe not the guy that he was supposed to be when the Tennessee Titans drafted him in the second round a couple years ago, but just a rock solid player right now. He's not really, again, like you're talking like a low end starter, maybe a high end backup type of player, but look, I would kill for that on the Colts at several positions. I would kill for the return of Bargain Bin Ballard when it comes to free agency because we haven't even had the bargain bin.
Yeah, he didn't even do that last year.
Yeah, so like if Christian Fulton's like the Bargain Bin Ballard type of signing, I'm all for it because it gives the Colts a playable corner aside from Womack and Jones on the outside. The same goes for Shaq Griffin, a former high draft pick, a first-round draft pick back in the day for the Seattle Seahawks. He's played for the Jaguars. He's played for the Vikings is where he just played this past season. I think he played for like the Cowboys too. He's kind of just a journeyman guy who bounces around the league, but he just gives solid play everywhere he goes. Again, he's a guy where he raises the floor of your defense. He's not going to really help your ceiling, but if you have an injury, you're not resorted down to who was that? Bo Peep Keys that we had a couple years ago. Yeah, you're not resorted to throwing Bo Peep Keys out there because you have a player like Shaq Griffin. Now we're talking about the 2 buy low options. Brandon Stevens from the Baltimore Ravens, a former 3rd-round pick, former running back in college at SMU. He had a really good season 2 years ago. Last year was one of the worst corners in football, but he has what I call the Carlos Rogers disease last year, where very, very good at being in the right position, but just could not find the football whatsoever. And for me, as someone who has watched corners my whole life, I know that all it takes is like you get to a right spot where you can track the football and you could be a pretty good corner. And I call this the Carlos Rogers disease because when Carlos Rogers was with Washington early in his career, not a really good starting corner, goes to the 49ers, all of a sudden leads the NFL in interceptions because he went to the right spot where this corner who's in the right spot all the time finally was able to locate the football, and you saw what he could be. So maybe that's what you can hope for with Brandon Stevens. He'd also be reuniting with Chris Hewitt, who he spent his entire career with, the Colts defensive backs coach right now. So I think that's a feasible buy low option where If he gets cut in camp, that could be realistic as well. But just get him in here, good size, 6 foot, 215 pounds, runs a 4.4, has some good film in the past. I think that's really worth like a low end deal just to bring in here and see what he can do. And then Eric Stokes, like I can't really be too positive about this one because he really hasn't been very good in the NFL. Former first round pick out of Georgia. It just has not worked out whatsoever with the Green Bay Packers. This would purely be a waiver on a former first round pick. But again, at this point, why not bring him in here, have him compete? He's got all the measurables, like a 4.2 type player at 6 foot, 200 pounds. Like he checks every box physically and athletically. He just hasn't been a good corner in the NFL. But look, it doesn't hurt bringing that in to see what he can do. So those are the 4 guys that really caught my eye and who I think could really fit. And you can see if one of these guys can become something. I mean, not to go on too much of a tangent here, but the Eagles just won the Super Bowl with one of their core defensive players being a buy low player in Zach Bond that they signed from the New Orleans Saints. So even some of these guys where you're looking at their past destinations and saying like, he wasn't really used right, or he just wasn't very good there, can still be effective players in your system and your scheme. So guys like Stevens and to a lesser degree, Eric Stokes might be something like that for a team like the Colts.
I'll throw some others in there. And again, they're not ones you're planning to necessarily start, but they're more insurance or competitors for that, that third corner spot, perhaps. Nate Hobbs from the Raiders, Amani Oruwariye from the Cowboys, Akello Witherspoon who's a guy who for 2 or 3 straight off seasons you were pounding the table for.
Yes.
Dory Jackson, if you want to go the senior citizen route. But, he's been there, done that. He's still athletic, ton of experience. He could be that 4th corner for you, basically. And then Isaiah Oliver from the Jets. For the most part, all these guys have the size and physicality, the experience in the NFL. And again, you're not signing them to super rely on them to like save your defense. Yeah. You're getting them in here because they kind of check your thresholds that you want in a corner. They have the experience. They are good enough to compete for a pretty decent role, but also they provide that insurance when you inevitably have the injuries that always crop up. Because again, we haven't been talking about Juju Brents in this all really because he's just kind of a cherry on top if he's there. You kind of have to, he's under contract, but you have to prepare as if he's not going to be there because that's what his track record has been. So you need someone like this. Again, the best option is perhaps these cheaper options if you feel like you still want to give Juju Brents a shot. But whether you go, the guys we covered in segment 2, the big money route, or any number of these guys, you got to do it. Like you cannot go into the 2025 season with the current group. And obviously drafting guys, the draft has not been kind to you for the most part, whether it's the guys you probably should have drafted but passed up on, or the guys you did draft and already who aren't here or have injury issues. Like the draft has not been your avenue so far. So free agency, you at least know who these guys are.
Yeah, and I think in a perfect world, we'd say, hey, sign Charvarius Ward to whatever it takes, 2-year, $18 million per year contract, go a little bit crazy, get him in here, get a good corner that can provide a good starter for the team. But at the very least, the Colts need to get one of these like buy low options, just a playable guy. If we think about what the Colts went into camp with at corner last year, it was a rookie coming off his rookie season, 7th round pick, a 2nd round pick who barely played his rookie season going into year 2, and then a couple of undrafted free agent type guys or like late round picks, and then Womack, who they claimed off of waivers. That was their cornerback room last year. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to be a 1st round pick for a team to be great, but you do need to have some resources put into the position, whether it's paying a little bit more for a free agent, whether it's spending a top 50 draft pick in this class. Like there needs to be something done about corner, because just hoping that your 7th round pick hits, or in like a Dallas Flowers case, hoping that your undrafted free agent from 3 years ago hits, or in the Womack case, hoping that your waiver wire pickup hits. Like that's not sustainable. I know they've been lucky or maybe even good in the past at hitting on those unsustainable things, but that's what separates like the good teams from the great teams is you can have those like late round hits, but also invested in the position. Look at the Buffalo Bills. They traded for Rasul Douglas 2 years ago, but then Christian Benford, their former 7th-round pick, had a huge breakout season as well. And it just made that cornerback room great. Now imagine if they'd never made that move for Rasul Douglas. They're putting out their former bust in Kyrie Elam all the time instead, and they're not getting nearly as far this year. So there needs to be that push-pull of being aggressive and also having those late-round guys, like having the trust in them and hoping they can break out as well. So they at the very least need to do something at corner this offseason, whether it's competition, whether it's, getting a veteran. Like, it just can't be Samuel Womack versus the 2 games we're going to get out of Juju Brents going into camp and then hoping that one of them becomes like a star. Like, that's just not going to work, because even Jalen Jones on the other side shouldn't be like the undeniable starter. Like, they need competition in camp. But you guys let us know what you would do in the comment section. Let us know if you would sign big time free agent money for like a Paulson Adebo or Charvarius Ward, or if some of these like lower end buy low options are more your fancy there. Let us know in the comments section there below. And thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On Colts your first listen today and every day. Next, go find Locked On NFL. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. And if you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider, chat with us directly and get first dibs on Q&A episodes. Follow the link in our show notes. And if you don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube, where we listen to your podcast. We love you guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.